episode 3 of Cloudy with a Chance of Insights, a bi-weekly podcast discussing what's new in the Microsoft Cloud, as well as providing our opinion on how these features and services may be used to help you get the most out of your investment. This week, we have a broad range of topics. Cyrus will discuss the Maester, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, suite of tools, which is a PowerShell-based test automation framework designed to help you stay in control of your Microsoft security configuration. I will cover what seems to be my new favorite topic, which is zero trust. And David will cover off oversharing controls in M365, which I think follows on quite nicely from that zero trust piece and also what we discussed in the previous episode. We'll finish with a roundup of any interesting, possibly non-Microsoft articles that caught our eyes. And a quick point to note, we are recording this a week before release due to various Christmas breaks and holidays. So I hope that we don't get a big or essential story that breaks over the next week or so that we would have, miraculously missed or not covered when this is released. However, having said that, that's probably what everyone in the US thought last year during Thanksgiving, when Sam Altman was temporarily ousted from OpenAI, which caused a lot of fuss and interest in that time. But anyway, touch wood, nothing like that's going to happen. So seeing as I figured out last week how to make chapters work, for those watching on YouTube, if there's a particular topic that interests you, please feel free to use those to navigate to that section. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it across to Cyrus, who's going to talk about Maester. And quite frankly, I'm not sure about anyone else, but I seem to learn about a new tool or service every time we record an episode, which possibly does not reflect well on me. And this week is no exception. So Cyrus, please take it away.
Thank you. It'd be hard to define completely what's Maester, but as easy as described, I'm going to read the first quotation they use in the official presentation. Gartner predicts that through 2025, more than 99% of cloud breaches will be traced back to preventable misconfiguration or mistakes by the end users. So that's the thing they claim. And Meryl Fernando, which is a PM in Microsoft and in the EIM side, Mantra, created an open source tool based on Maester, and I will talk about your Maester for doing the testing. So Maester is a tool that is known by a lot of people. It's a unit testing tool, and we all kind of use it once at least, I think. And you can use it for everything. You can create custom tests, and it's mainly used for local infrastructure or local, like you have Cisco networks, to see if the configuration is the same as you expect. And that's pretty nice. But for whoever used it, the test result is really a bit complex to read. It's not very user-friendly. So what happened with that tool is Manuel Fernando and whoever contributed on the tool with him used the Maester tool to make it cloud ready and use it in the Microsoft platforms. For example, Windows 365 admin, Defender, Entra, etc. So basically, it's Maester under the hood, and with custom PowerShell modules that will make, in few command lines, you can have automated testing, and with very nice and easy to read results. I like to work with examples. You have, for example, the one they use in the presentation, and I encourage everyone to check. They use this page that you all know now, the authentication methods in Entra, and you have, for example, this page, and we say, are you sure that everything is configured correctly, and there is no security potential risk? So based on that page, it's hard to say. You can check with your eyes, you can see if you have all the authentication methods, and that's it. But usually you lack context because every page requires different pages. And there's one example they use, and I really like that example. One tenant configured conditional access policy for guest users. So all the partners, all the external providers for that company had to go through that conditional access. So that conditional access was checked every week, and all the configuration was set correctly. But for a year, no one, no partners, no investors, no external users used that conditional access. Why? Because someone did a cleanup, and the Entra ID group was the users inside that Entra ID group were removed, and they used a different group. So for a year, no one knew that this conditional access was okay, well configured, but never used. So this kind of thing, you have like blind spots. And the good thing of Maester, and I also had difficulty to see how we can pronounce it. The Maester can help you see those blind spots. They have a tool called What If. So it's not the same tool as What If in the conditional access. What If in the conditional access is more to test specific policies and against some scenarios. So it's very reactive. The one from Maester is more proactive. So you can see what happens if this type of users use any form of policy, what they can access, and you can define manually the user risk, whatever level you want. And you have also presets. So you can just launch the test as it is. You download Maester for the first time. You launch 2 command line in PowerShell, and that's it. You have natively 193 tests now today. There was like 78 few months ago. But now it passed the V1. It's not a beta anymore. It's an official tool. You have natively plenty of tests, and you can see if you failed or passed, basically. And when you fail a test, for example, you can just click in the page, and you have how to remediate, why this test was important. Why do you have, for example, to cut non-secure authentication method, for example, voice call, SMS, or email OTP? And they explain why, and they give you, for example, some reference, some compliance, etc. The CIS, for example, would explain better. So you have the link for those page, and you have also the link directly on the Microsoft portal. It's not just a set of recommendations. You have the link to the Microsoft portal on where to deactivate or enable such features, which saves a lot of time. And the cherry on the cake for me, that's why I wanted to talk about it today, is how it is easy to implement that in DevOps. So you can easily just, without any knowledge, literally, there's people recording themselves on YouTube for the first time, reading about the documentation, and in few minutes, just implementing an automatic email sent every day to all the admins. And with that, you can see some configuration drift by default. And because it's based on Pester, you can also do custom policy, custom checks, and it's all made simplified. So you just launch the custom tests you want, and every day you can see, and that's for me the most important one is, okay, you have set all the custom policy, all the conditional access, you set up your Entra the way you want, etc. But that's not it. Tomorrow, if there's an adversarial attackers, you need to know if there is any change in the configuration. So every day you can see what change happened in your configuration in code. You can see, for example, it went from enabled to disabled, and you can see exactly the change, etc. So it's very powerful. It removes, I think, almost all the blind spots in your configuration profiles. You see exactly what happens. And it can be an asset for any companies, because that the differentiators can be how you design your custom configuration design. Custom Pesta settings.
Absolutely, sorry. So I mean, that sounds very useful, and it's something that I wish I'd had about 5 or 6 years ago when I was doing some work around identity, which I'm going to cover off actually a little bit later on. And it's nice that we actually seem to be unknowingly creating a little theme for this for this episode around sort of identity and access controls. I do remember going back to that project that we spent a lot of time doing conditional access policies to control access into certain parts of the business and to enforce MFA. Again, I'm going to come on to that a little bit later on. And we assumed that we'd actually configured everything correctly. And because we weren't getting any complaints and people weren't, raising help desk tickets saying, "Oh, I didn't get prompted for MFA here," because no one raises a help desk ticket when they don't get prompted for MFA. They tend to raise them when they get prompted too many times. They don't raise them when they don't get an MFA prompt.
Completely.
So we just assumed everything was working fine. But we went back in a little while later and did an audit, and we found out that actually one of the conditional access policies was slightly misconfigured, and nobody had noticed. So we'd done like a test piece on a small subset of users. Everybody said fine, but then when it went into production, and inverted commas, we just didn't notice that something had gone wrong because there was no real compliance monitoring tool to say, actually, hang on a second, there's something that's not right here. So I wish that tool had been available at that point in time.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because Pester, I remember with a large oil and gas company when I was at Microsoft and undergoing their very first journeys into infrastructure as code, and Pester was absolutely key behind the back of that to make sure that you're running these automated tests to try and drive, proper infrastructure as code. So it's nice to see that tooling still lives and is still useful, right, Sarah?
Yeah.
It's made cloud ready. It's so cool.
Again, with my new security hat on, although as we all know, I'm more on the alliance side than I am a sort of technical architect these days. It's nice for me to see that sort of code-based solution come more into the security realm and be integrated into the wider. It does say DevSecOps for a reason, but integrated into those processes. Anyway, David. Over to you for oversharing controls. Then I will sort of wrap up with a repeat of some of what we've just said.
Very good. Thank you, Richard. And this follows on, as you said, from some of the past conversations we had. I think we mentioned one of the previous episodes around Delve and how when Delve was first introduced into organizations, all of a sudden people are finding content that they probably shouldn't have done due to lack of permissions. And here we are today with Copilot and people doing very much the same thing when you turn on Copilot in M365 and, give me all the confidential reports, please. Could be a potential query. And unfortunately, with incorrect permissions being enabled means people can find it. So, and people are doing this without realizing it. It can happen day-to-day tasks, really easy to do in M365. Are you sharing with a person, a group, just everyone in the org? You think that link's only going to one person, but then that person forwards it on to another and another and another, and before you know it, you have these challenges. And I guess, it's like leaving the door open, in a house full of valuables. It's unintentional, but quite risky. You live in the depths of Wales, as I used to, absolutely fine. You live in central London, probably not so much. So the solution for this, now we've spoken about Purview as well on our past calls, and we know it helps businesses monitor, control who can access what, and making sure that obviously sensitive information stays in the right hands. As part of this, we have Data Security Posture Management, DSPM, and this is AI powered, obviously, and it works like a watchtower across your data. Helps identify risky behaviors, flag sensitive information, gives recommendations on how to do it. But the thing that I'd missed, and this was announced in the Nova, is the thing in November, was a oversharing report. And this is a special tool in Purview that will actually look at your data, use GenAI to understand the context of that data. Is it confidential? Who's it shared with? And then it will share that back so that you can actually take some recommendations as to, the AI thinks this data is actually at risk. You might need to do something so you can do something before something bad happens, right? And I think that's, in the security context, trying to be as proactive as possible. You talk a lot about shift left in terms of development. Certainly in the infrastructure world, trying to shift left the security has always been quite challenging. People are always, I guess, resistant, Richard, for whatever reason. So the more we can be proactive about this, the more opportunity we have as organizations to ensure that our data is secure. And, why does that matter? We know that, we've got data breaches on the rise. We still need to enable collaboration, because collaboration is at the core of this, whether it's in organization, externally, and using tools like this gives you a way of offering to, I guess, balance those needs of being able to share data securely and collaborate whilst ensuring it's secure. So I thought it was really interesting, and I completely missed it. So
you'll sort of go into my sort of focus area for the next year, because with various conversations with both with clients, with Microsoft internally at IBM, in that there is a lack of trust that the organization has got a handle on its data security. Yeah. And this makes sense for me, because it's always been a very low priority, I think, for most organizations. They're aware of it, but it sort of gets dropped down behind other sort of security concerns. And also, typically, because it might not fall up underneath the CISO, it's not necessarily considered as part of that sort of security strategy. It normally filters through to a CDO or some sort of data compliance team.
Yeah.
But if you look at how Copilot, or M365 Copilot in particular, works, in effect, it really just leverages the Graph API. Then the Graph API has access to everything that is in the M365 and outside the M365 estate, and really only cares about the permission model in terms of whether you can access it or not. So my concern on this is not necessarily that I'm going to get users saying, "Oh, give me confidential reports." It's more that users are going to sit there and do a prompt that they don't think is malicious.
Yes.
And then because of the way the LLM structures the prompt and then filters that through to the Graph API, that you might get things coming back that you wouldn't expect. And the way that the answers the responses are framed can give you a different behavior to those users than would probably happen if you were doing this on SharePoint search, because the SharePoint search was always the same. You could go in and say, give me all the confidential reports. And if the confidential reports weren't secured, you'd get them. But I think in the way that the search results within SharePoint and within Delve were displayed, most users would look at it and go, oh, hang on a second, that I shouldn't access that because it's called confidential report A or whatever. But there's a possibility, I think, with Copilot that your response might be framed in such a way that you won't know that it's a confidential piece until you actually start drilling into it. Now, that might be supposition on my part, and I might be completely wrong, but that would be my concern. I think that's the concern of a lot of people as well. And that is a certain hindrance, I think, around the adoption. Anyway, long waffling response to that, which I think is a concern for organizations. But hey, say la vie, we are where we sort of are with that. And I think it's interesting to see the pivots that we're now getting around that whole data security layer and the balancing act between we want to collaborate, and especially we want to collaborate externally. We want to collaborate with our external partners, but we have to have some sort of controls. So that balancing act is interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
Which nicely, ironically, considering we actually hadn't planned this at all, in my head anyway, brings me on to what I'm going to talk about. But before we start that, anybody who is still listening at this point in time, A, thank you very much. But B, you obviously found this content of use and of an interesting nature. So please like, subscribe, follow, rate, whatever it is for the platform that you're on. It really does help us. A, in understanding the content that we do, whether it's relevant, whether it's useful, and B, it helps other people find the content as well. So please just take 5 minutes or whatever to go and do that within the relevant platforms. Now, we've talked about identity from both sides in a sense. Cyrus with the Maester tools, David with the oversharing controls, and they all in my head come back to A, identity, but also zero trust. Now, Again, disclosure time. We all three of us work for IBM. IBM don't sponsor this podcast. None of the content here is, authorized or whatever. It's all our own opinions. However, it's very difficult, at least for me, to sort of, move that piece out of the way and be completely sort of not neutral, but to ignore what we've been doing on a sort of daily basis. Now, over the last couple of weeks, I've been looking at what we're going to be doing next year with the MITRE offering within IBM. So we were actually expanding our capabilities and looking at sort of broadening the offerings that we have around that space, which got me to thinking and started to look at some of the content that I'd previously created, and both internally and externally. And it was clear that zero trust was a topic that was driving interest. So if I was looking at, say, some of the content we've got on the internal intranets, for example, some of the searches was basics of zero trust, fundamentals of zero trust. What is zero trust? And I think it's interesting, based on certainly what the conversation that we've had, that zero trust plays a massive role in those as a concept. I'm not talking about technology, because zero trust can be applied to a Google shop or a Microsoft shop or an AWS shop. It's a concept. It's not necessarily a suite of specific tools.
No.
But it does change the paradigm from both, I think myself and David have certainly been in organizations where they would have a very sort of perimeter focused security model. So you shall not pass. So everything stays on the outside and nothing comes in. And if it does come in, then it's almost fully trusted, and you can do whatever you want to within that. And the example I've used in a recent post I've done is around like an office building. So if you're lucky, you might walk into your office building and have to tap your security pass on the gate, or wave to a security guard or a receptionist, whoever it might well be, which is a level of sort of, perimeter security, for want of a better word. So once you're through that, typically in organizations, you can go anywhere within that office space. The only exceptions that I've seen are things like server rooms. Sometimes might well have an extra pass, or perhaps the CEO office might well have a receptionist sat outside that you can't get in. But in effect, you're open to do whatever you want to. And that, for me, is almost like a perimeter network. You have a check before you get in, and then once you're in, you can do almost what you want to do. Zero trust, in effect, changes that. And it basically means that although you still have those checks on the external, you still have to tap your security pass to get into the office. You then have to basically present it every time you go into a different area, or go into an office room, or go into the cafeteria, or go to the lifts, whatever it might be. You still have to sort of have that pass with you and potentially be able to use it to authenticate yourself. And that really does make a change in the user behavior that is expected. And actually, one of the articles I'm going to bring up when we do the roundup is around how Microsoft have actually used sort of a nudging technique to get people to use passkeys within their systems. But coming back a little bit around the whole zero trust piece and what Cyrus has mentioned about conditional access, we talked about oversharing. If you think about one of the first things that we can do within a zero trust is around identity piece. So whether that's RBAC, whether that is access requests, joiners, movers and leavers, controls, whatever it might well be. One of the first things is conditional access policies. And that is how you would apply MFA typically. There are other ways of applying MFA, but the most elegant way, I think, is via conditional access policies. And so for those that don't know, conditional access policy is a function within MITRE, which enables you to set a series of criteria. So, for example, you could set by user type. So, for example, if you wanted to, you could say, okay, all admins have to do MFA. So the check would be, are you an admin? Yes, you are. Okay, right, we're going to enforce an MFA policy on you. So you have to sign in. Now, that criteria could be location-based. It could be device-based. If you're coming in from a non-corporate laptop, for example, you have to go and do MFA. If you are coming in from an unexpected country, for example, you might have to go and do MFA. So that is the entry sort of layer for, in my opinion, for zero trust, is to say, okay, right, we're just going to start to apply these controls based on the user, and continually, and I think that's the important thing, continually apply those. So it's not just a one and done. You're continually having to go through this process. And I think there's a stat from, I can't remember if it's more from Microsoft or not, I'll dig it up and put it down, but it's like 95% of all sort of malicious activities can be stopped or at least mitigated by applying MFA. And that's almost, as I said, that's almost the first step from applying a zero trust policy downwards. And what we'll do, what I'll do certainly is take a section of that and probably drill down, whether it's in this or whether it's in a separate medium, and actually start to look at, okay, right, conditional access policies, access requests, RBAC roles, and actually start to look at what they all mean as part of a wider, certainly a wider identity piece, but also then probably follow into the other pillars of zero trust, so endpoints, data, networks, etc., as we go through. Anyway, that was my sort of ramble, rant, whatever you want to call it, on zero trust. And before we wrap up today, we obviously do a little roundup of what we've discussed. I'll go first for this one because it sort of follows in from exactly what I was saying. So Microsoft Security released a blog post last week, I think now. So actually, when this goes live, that'll be 2 weeks ago, around how they deployed what they thought was going to be a very sort of friction into the user experience, which was trying to get people to use passkeys when they log in. And this is part of their wider sort of SFI, Secure Futures initiative, where they're trying to sort of, lock down or make more secure some of their sort of public cloud instances. As we all know, I'm sure we've done it, badly implemented MFA can be a pain. Just not necessarily from a user perspective, but also from there. And it also does remind me to make that a lot of things like MFA, for example, are not really a technical change. To implement MFA in M365, as I said, one of the easiest ways is conditional access policy, and that's 3 or 4 clicks, and you can apply MFA to the organization. So it's not really a technical change. It becomes a user adoption change. So how do you get your users to be okay with having that additional friction of either, clicking a button, getting an SMS message, reading the text message, reading the number out, enter it into a box, which is what we're trying to avoid with these passkeys. So this article was actually quite interesting in the way that they slowly try to nudge people to doing this. So, do you want to log in faster? Do you want to log in more securely? Do you want to do this? So it's all these little sort of nudges that they've spread out across the user base to try and get people to encourage them to do this. And they were able to look at the metrics, do sort of A/B testing to see which was working, which wasn't working. The end result, and the article was actually, it's not a bad little read actually. So again, I'll put the link in the show notes, was that by doing this, they'd actually managed to roll out, in effect, a passkey-based authentication system to X number of million of users with relatively little negative impact or input from the actual user base, which was interesting because you think that, again, especially considering that this is going to things like Xbox users or, home M365 users who might not be the most technical people out there. I'm probably going to get shot by all the Xbox people there that say, actually, no, we are. But, to get that adoption level that they seem to have claimed just by making small tweaks to the messaging that they're putting out to the users, I thought was very interesting.
I think that having great examples of where that user engagement and communication bit is done well, actually you don't see a lot of those. So I'm quite looking forward to reading that one, Richard, because every project, every program, it's not usually the technology that fails, right? It's how it's been rolled out, how people are adopting it, and how they're encouraged to continue using it in the right ways. So,
I mean, as I said, we've both been in this space for a little while now with the M365 or Office 365. I can't remember what it was called before Office 365, but we were.
It was a business productivity suite online. Before that, it was Exchange Online.
BPOS.
Yes,
so, I can't even remember. So whatever it was called, it's never. Those SaaS services are not really a technical change. Yes, there are some technical things you have to do. You have to set up Azure AD Connect, for example, and you probably have to do a few other bits and pieces. But primarily, it's a business change. It's how do you get users to use those services? Okay, Exchange, you don't have an issue with because people don't use Exchange; they use Outlook, and they've used Outlook for X number of years, so they don't care where it's hosted. But to get people to use SharePoint, OneDrive, OneNote, some of those other tools, Stream, that's part of the M365 platform, has always been a user adoption challenge, not a technology challenge.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's interesting to see that we're starting to use some of the same methods when we're talking about other tools. So we did again, going back onto an IBM thing here, we did an Entra rollout for a bank in the UK. And a lot of the work that we did around there was actually around user adoption. It was, okay, right, so when you do this, you're going to get prompted for, an MFA request. Here's how you do it. This is why we're doing it. So it was that education piece to try and reduce the number of help desk calls and reduce the user dissatisfaction, for want of a better word, with the extra step that they were being asked to do as part of the MFA piece. But anyway, who would like to go next? Actually, perhaps, David, I'll pass it across to you for your little tidbit this week.
Yeah, I've got silly things.
Yeah.
Because it's Christmas and I've finished work for the year, so I thought I'd share some fun, silly stuff. And I think, what does it say when you try and copy something, it's the best form of flattery. Well, there's a couple of those. So there's a Linux distribution called Ubuntu, and it actually looks and feels a lot like Windows. And I was quite impressed. I had a little gander at it the other day, and it's, people want to switch from Windows to Linux. I'd always argue how many of those people there actually are, but they want familiar experience. And it comes with Edge. Teams, comes with Visual Studio Code, all pre-installed. It's like, that's awesome. And I think, part of what's driving that, albeit it's silly, the requirement for TPM for you to be able to get Windows 11 and the millions and millions and millions of perfectly serviceable devices that are out there at the moment, and people, I think, are feeling aggrieved that they won't get Windows 11, although that's just changed recently, right? There was an announcement that said, yes, you can upgrade if you haven't got a TPM, but we're not going to support you. So people are kind of still in the same place. So who knows? But I thought that would be quite interesting. And in a similar vein, I saw a YouTube video, and we'll be sure to tag the author, but it's where somebody's created a Windows 10 launcher for Android. So Windows Phone and the live tiles. I think we touched on this one of the other episodes. Well, not long after we spoke of that, maybe it was the internet algorithms that served this up to me after we spoke to it. But it looks really, really good. So you can have your Android phone looking like Windows Phone with live tiles and everything. So I thought that's a bit of Christmas fun for those that are nostalgic for Windows 10.
I might dig up my Android phone. Yeah, and put that on there. Although I'm using a Mac, an iPhone at the moment. I know we sort of discussed this, so I'm probably repeating myself. But I don't know what it was, what the number was, Dave. You might remember. So again, we were both at Microsoft at the same time that the Windows Phone was launched. But I had like the big Nokia, the massive
950 XL
or whatever it was. Yeah, the really big brick. That thing is still going.
Yeah, I've still got it. I've still got it in a drawer back here.
That is so cool. I didn't know.
Yeah, I gave it to a relative, and they're happily still using it. Yep.
Wow. Nokia.
And it's awesome. The camera's still awesome. It works really well, but obviously nothing works anymore.
And if you think about it, on the iPhone now, the sort of dynamic island and some of the, I can't remember what they're calling it, that they basically call live tiles in effect on iPhone. So, Balmer and and Sanofsky, etc., were possibly right with that interface. Just a stupid name, MITRE, which they ended up having to change anyway because someone had copyrighted it.
Yeah.
All right, Cyrus.
There was two news, actually. There's the one that is about Microsoft covering 100% of the MITRE attack framework. That is the fourth time in a row. But 100% is a lot, and I'll explain why. So first of all, for whoever read and didn't understand what I said, MITRE attack is a framework. I think was invented by the MIT. That's why we call it MITRE. They have their own non-profit group. And the attack, I think, means I have the here, adversarial techniques, and common knowledge. That's a framework to imagine like you have a giant map of all the possible paths of attacks. So weird map, but you have all the possible techniques, made it standard of the way that an intruder can come into your tenant or steal your data. What that framework tries to solve is to have a common language between the cybersecurity landscape. For example, you would not say the intruder came through a back door. That will make no sense apart from a movie. You will say probably that user used the T1566 method, which is spear phishing. So the interesting part of it is you made it standard and you codify any possible. How it works, it's like a giant matrix, and you have like a grid with 3 levels. The first level is like all the tactics, and the tactics actually is like the strategic level. Is what is your intent, what is your goal, initial access, lateral movement, data exfiltration, etc. You have the techniques. So how you're going to achieve that goal. For example, in an example, for the initial access, you will use spear phishing method. And I'm sorry if I say it wrongly. My pronunciation is spear phishing. You use that techniques, and then you have procedures. So it's TTP, tactics, techniques, and procedures. And the process, sorry. And the process can be, for example, a specific tool or a specific reusable method. For example, some emails that you send with an attachment that will, once clicked, will give the next stage of the technique. So why is it important to have the 100% coverage? So almost all the Fortune 100 SMBs, all the companies now try to use that common language. It became a standard today. What does it mean that for Microsoft to have 100%? Means that whatever attack was tried into the Microsoft security products, which were not the best a few years ago, but now it means that any kind of attack you do against a Microsoft house, if you have Defender, if you have Entra, etc., all the Microsoft products are capable to classify and understand what's happening, which helps also to prevent the attack. For example, in the test, they can use any kind of attack, and the Microsoft product can say easily, okay, so the user click here, then the server miles away started to behave weirdly. So I can link those attacks, create the tactics, the lateral movement, and I can see also data exfiltration. So you have this map. It's phenomenal. It's like saying that actually Microsoft don't have any blind spots. So I thought it was interesting news to share and to understand also the MITRE attack. It's a very interesting framework. The second use actually happened today, and it's on the Microsoft blog. It's on the SOC optimization feature from Sentinel, but it's also on the unified platform. It's called, and I forget the name because the name I extended here. Yes, similar organizations recommendation. So what is that? So if you're like me and you go every week or often to that Microsoft security page, you have like a feature called a similar organization with a lot of data. That is not really helpful, in my opinion. That's not what I'm talking about. This is more Microsoft assessing your security posture, how you use your Sentinel, Defender, etc., and can guess your industry, can guess what you are trying to achieve. And again, I give an example. Sentinel, you have connected some data connectors, and you enable that feature, and you're happy. But you don't know if you have blind spots. You don't know if you configure it correctly, etc. So what that feature does, and this is for free, it will assess you and say, okay, based on different companies that you have the similar environment as yours, we can tell that actually you try to see what the user is doing here on that environment. So to achieve your goal, we recommend you to also activate this table and ingest those kind of logs that you ignored. So why I was impressed with that thing is you don't need that much knowledge. You think you activated, you invest a lot of logs, ingest a lot of logs, and you activated data connector, and that's it. No, this will explain you why this table is important, or those tables are important, and not only will tell you that is important, but will help you to ingest them, or even with one click button to say, I can mitigate that for you. And then after a few hours, you can see that those logs are indeed ingested, but you also understand why you did that. So it helps you completely, like the MITRE attack before, it helps you to remove blind spots proactively. And that can enable ever junior SOC analysts, junior SOC architects, even CISO, when they check, they think, okay, data connector is activated, there's plenty of green tick, everyone is happy, but you don't know if you don't know. And those tables can help. That's one example I use. There's plenty of it. So the feature was officially, so it was in private preview for months. It was released today, and I'm doing a bit of self-promotion. Allow me. I made my own comments that is also on the Microsoft blog. So if you want to read, I really endorse that.
Awesome. Very, really cool.
For the user.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cyrus. I think that just about wraps us up for this week. So just leaves me to wish everybody happy holidays, or whatever the phrase is, regardless of where you are in the world. And we will be back in the new year. So yes, again, thank you for watching, and have a good time.
Thank you.